Hello friends, welcome back to my book channel. Today, as you saw in the title of this week's video, we are going to be talking about 10 books that I think will make you fall absolutely in love with reading. But also, if you already love reading, these are books that I think are perfect for getting out of a reading slump. And I didn't want to just recite all of my favorite books to you guys. So these are books that I truly think meet the description of will get your attention, will get you into reading. And yeah, I just love these books so much and I'm so excited to share them with you. So let's get into the video. Genre-wise, we're going to be bouncing all over the place, but the first book that I want to talk to you guys about in this video is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. This is one of the books that I read early on when I was getting back into reading, and I just absolutely loved this book then, and I love this book now. In the story, we're following our main character, Agnes. She is a wife and a mother, and while her husband is never named in this story, we as the audience know that her husband is Shakespeare. And so Maggie O'Farrell really recenters the life and story of Shakespeare on his wife and his children. It takes place in the 1500s when the Black Plague is sweeping through Europe, and Shakespeare's family was deeply affected by the Black Plague. And many people speculate that what happened to Shakespeare's family due to this plague later inspired the famous play that we now know as Hamlet. And so, yeah, even if you're not into Shakespeare, I highly recommend reading this book. And I think that's enough about this. It's so good. And I'm so glad that I read this when I was getting into reading. Switching things up a little bit, we have the Part of Your World trilogy by Abby Jimenez. These are romance books and I absolutely love these. I wish that I read them so much sooner. I got into Abby Jimenez like a year or two ago, but I think that if I was in a reading slump or wanted to get into reading, I wish that someone had recommended me these books because they are so good. In this video, I'm just going to focus on the first book. In book one, we're following Alexis Montgomery, who comes from a long family line of well-renowned famous surgeons. And Alexis is kind of wondering if she is on the right path, if that is the path that she wants to pursue. And one night on her drive home back to the big city that she lives in, she ends up in this small town and runs into Daniel, a very sexy carpenter. And Daniel really shakes up life for her. She cares for him more than she thought she would, and she just gets to see how different life is in a small town compared to the big city that she lives in. And ultimately, we start questioning whether or not their two worlds can combine and overlap in a way that results in a successful relationship. Abby Jimenez is so well known for creating fun, light, happy romances while also seamlessly combining emotional depth, and this book is the perfect instance of that. I love Abby Jimenez so much, and yeah, you guys definitely need to check out this series if you haven't already. Really quick, thank you guys so much for being here and watching my video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you, and I think that's it. On to the next book. This is a book that I rarely talk about on my channel, but it's actually a book very early on in my reading career that I gave 5 stars, and that book is The Martian by Andy Weir. I don't know if I had even touched sci-fi before picking up this book, but it is to this day one of my absolute favorite books and also just favorite sci-fi books. We're following our main character, Mark Watney, who is an astronaut, and he is in this crew of astronauts who are supposed to be the first people to walk on Mars. However, tragedy strikes on Mars and Mark's crew ends up leaving him there because they think he's dead, but it turns out that he is alive. And this becomes a survival strategy. We're following Mark as he tries to survive on the desolate planet of Mars. And you wouldn't think that this story would be very engaging, but I kid you not, the inner monologue of Mark, our main character, is phenomenal. It also is very high stakes because this is such a survival story. I love this book. It's so good. I'm not a huge sci-fi person. I do read them from time to time, but this has remained to be one of the best books that I've ever read. So highly recommend. I did just make an entire video on every single fantasy book that I have ever read. So I'm going to link that down below because it was my most recent upload. But when I was planning out this video, I didn't want to not include a fantasy book. So I feel like I just talked about this, but I literally just talked about every fantasy book I've ever read. So of all of those, if I were to pick one fantasy book that I think would be perfect for someone who is either getting into fantasy, getting into reading, or just wants to get out of a reading slump, I think that book would be Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This is a YA romantasy duology, and we're following our main character Iris. She is living in a historical time period. I don't think they ever say, but it feels very historical. You have this war going on between the gods, and in order to make ends meet, Iris is a writer at the local newspaper, and her brother is missing in action. And so to try to connect with her brother, she writes him these letters with her magical typewriter. The magical typewriter had other things in mind and ends up delivering her letters to Iris's rival at the newspaper, Roman Kit. And it's full of magic, it's full of beautiful writing, it's full of a little bit of academic or professional rivalry, which I love. And it's a duology, which is really, really great in the fantasy world. You're not starting a series of like 10 books. It's literally just 2. I'm actually reading the second book right now. For everyone who has been on me about finishing this duology, I am currently doing it and I am having so much fun. I love these books. I think they are a great place to start for readers, but also just like in the fantasy genre. I've done so good and not talked about this book in quite a while, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity to bring it back on your radar. And that book is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This is literary fiction, and we're following our 2 main characters, Sam and Sadie, who have been friends and in each other's lives for essentially as long as they can remember. They lose touch and they reconnect in their adult lives over the love of video games, but not just video games. The 2 of them are actually video game designers, and they come together and ultimately create one of the most famous and most successful video games in the world before the age of 25. And we're really closely following their relationship to each other, their relationship with the game, the actual designing and process of creating a video game. My favorite thing about this book is the characters and the character dynamics and the writing. Gabrielle Zevin writes this book in a way where when you finish it, it feels impossible that this isn't real. Like when I ended this book, I was like, Sam and Sadie are out there in the world somewhere existing, because it was just written in a way that I couldn't believe that this was just words on paper, like that kind of story. You know, it broke me apart and put me back together. I absolutely love this book. And if you're looking for literary fiction that also really keeps your attention, I'm gonna just slide Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow your way. Next, I want to talk about The Silent Patient, which is the lone thriller that I am talking about in this video. You guys know I'm not a huge thriller girl, but I do try to read a few every single year. And this is one that I picked up. This is actually the first thriller I might have ever read in my entire life. And it is still my favorite thriller that I've ever read. And I feel like that says a lot about this book. We are following our main character, Alicia, who seems to have it all. She's a famous painter. She lives in a beautiful home. She has a beautiful marriage, until one night her husband comes home and she shoots him 5 times. And no one understands why. And after she does this, she does not speak ever again. Hence, she becomes known as the Silent Patient. And our main character, Theo, is a criminal psychologist, and he's extremely fascinated with the mystery of Alicia. Why doesn't she talk? What really happened that night? And so he ends up investigating this case, and we follow him as he tries to speak to Alicia, who literally does not talk. And I kid you not, the plot twist at the end of this book just absolutely blew me away. I did not see it coming. I was so impressed. It was so good. I loved this book. It's a little slow to get into, I will warn you. Give it a little bit of time because it picks up a lot the further in you get. This is a book that I picked up when I was getting into reading, and it is still a book that I recommend all the time. The hype is there for a reason with this one. I love it. Then we have The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston, and this is a book that I read maybe a little over a year ago now. I cannot believe that this book has been in my life that short amount of time when I love it as much as I do. And I wanted to mention this book in this video because not only is it a romance, but it's a romance that incorporates magical realism elements, which I think if you're someone who maybe romance isn't enough for you, like it doesn't keep your attention, you want something a little extra, the magical realism in here is just the perfect touch. And hey, maybe you do love romance. I don't know. In the story, we're following our main character, Clementine, who is grieving the loss of her aunt. They were very, very close, but in her aunt's will, she left her this beautiful brownstone apartment in New York City. And so Clementine is moving into this brownstone apartment, and she's reflecting on how her aunt always used to tell her that this apartment was a magical apartment, and it had this tendency to slip around in time, 7 years. But Clementine, of course, is thinking, oh, my aunt is just a kooky, quirky lady, and obviously it wasn't actually magical. But one day after she moves in, she wakes up and finds a random man in her apartment, which is terrifying if you think about it. But as it turns out, the apartment has slipped back in time 7 years, and we meet Ewan, our other main character in here. I just loved the magic in here and the romance in here and the emotional depth and intimacy in this story. And I don't really like anything that involves time travel, but this book just did it so well. It has propelled itself into one of my top favorite books. Another more recent read that I wanted to talk about, especially as we get into the fall and winter months, is Beartown by Friedrich Bachmann. This is a story that's very different from anything that I had ever read, but the reason that I thought it might be a good book to mention in this video is because you get very emotionally invested and connected to the town and the characters, which I think as a reader, if you don't have that like deep investment in the outcome of these stories, and it's like, why are you reading? Like, if you don't care, what's even the point of picking up that book? And Beartown was one of those books for me where every time I picked it up, my heart was kind of racing because I just wanted the best thing for each and every character in this book. In this book, we're following a small town called Beartown that is, deep in the forest. It has long winters. But the thing that really brings this community together is their love of ice hockey. Their junior high ice hockey team has made it to the semifinals, and that's where we start this book. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen, and the town really all rallies together over the love of the game. However, a tragedy strikes in Beartown, and we watch as everybody copes differently. They tackle this problem differently, and it is equally devastating and beautiful. I loved this book. I thought it was fantastic, and I think if you're looking to get into fiction, not just reading, but fiction in general, this was such an incredible story, and I'm really excited to continue this series this winter. If you're a fiction girly or you're just in the mood for a fictional book with interesting characters and an interesting community, this one's fantastic. As promised, I do have a memoir to talk about today. I have read quite a few memoirs at this point. I really love memoirs, but one of my favorites is definitely Educated by Tara Westover. Tara grew up in rural Idaho and did not experience an education, set foot in a classroom until she was 17 years old. The family that she grew up in were very survivalist. And so everything that she did growing up and that her family did growing up was kind of with this lens of, if the world ends tomorrow, what are the things that we need to do to prepare? And so her life was very unconventional and very different than I think my own life, or maybe a lot of people watching this video. And so she really details not only what that experience was like growing up in Idaho, but also how transformative it was to get an education and become educated later in life. And this is heartbreaking. Like, it is really difficult to get through, just to read all of these true and real things that Tara experienced. But at the same time, it gave me so much gratitude and appreciation for my own education. If you want to pick up a memoir, this one is great. And last but not least, I wanted to talk about one more romance today, and that is Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. Guys, this is just the sweetest, cutest, most adorable and fun romance ever. I love this book. And again, I'm like, oh, Why didn't I find Hannah Bonham Young as an author earlier on, because she is so fun and so cute and I loved this book. In this story, we have Wynne, our female main character, who, you know, her life's pretty normal. Nothing crazy really happens on the day-to-day. And one night she goes to her best friend's Halloween party. And at this Halloween party, Wynne has a one-night stand with this guy named Beau. Of course, it's the best one-night stand of her life. But a few weeks later, she realizes that she got pregnant at the Halloween party. And so in this book, we watch as her and Beau navigate becoming friends and then becoming more than friends all throughout Wynne's pregnancy. I know there's mixed opinions on accidental pregnancy, but anytime that the pregnancy has happened in the beginning of the book, I tend to really enjoy it. If it's like a surprise thing at the end, then I obviously am not a huge fan. And there's also a lot of disability representation in this book from both of our characters, which I really appreciated and I'd never read about before. And I know that Hannah Bonham Young is writing with the experience of having some of these disabilities that Wynne, at least our female main character, has. And so I just loved her perspective as an author. If you want a romance that's sweet and cute and fun, but also has depth and also is I don't know, just a little bit different than maybe a lot of the other run-of-the-mill romances that you've read before, this one is fantastic. And again, I wish I found Hannah Bonham Young earlier in my reading career, because I think it would have propelled me into not only a romance obsession, but just being obsessed with all her books. Okay, besties, those are 10 books that I think will either make you fall in love with reading or get you out of a reading slump, or maybe you just needed some new book recommendations. These are some of my favorites. Not all of them are 5 stars for me. I just really feel like if you're looking for a book to get into and that's gonna take all of your brain cells, essentially, you put the book down and you're thinking about it and you want to pick it back up again, these are the books that I think that you should read. I think that was it from me. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you guys made it all the way to this point in the video, comment down below the book emoji. I hope you guys are having a great day and a great reading month, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!